Welcome to Bledsoe Said So, guys. This is an episode that I think has been a long time coming. Today we are joined by my friend Miguel Conner, who I personally have been following for around 7 or 8 years now. First heard him on a couple of shows talking about Gnosticism, and I have to say he's probably the best one out here doing it. So I'm excited to get into this. But before we go too far, I just want to mention three things really quick. So if you want to stay current on all of our Bledsoe Said So events, follow us on our Instagram, Bledsoe Said So. That's where we post all of our announcements, our conference schedules. We put clips of the show on there. Anything we're doing, Sky Watches, can't forget that one. Follow us on Instagram. And then our website, you can find the links to all of our channels and social media hubs. Like we have merch on there. We have, our Patreon links, YouTube, all that good stuff, bledsoesetso.com. And then if you want to support the show and even be a part of the show, check us out on Patreon. We have a couple of tiers on there, and we are looking at even expanding into some other tiers in the near future. So without further ado, Miguel from Aeon Byte Radio Podcast. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, it's an honor. It's an absolute honor. And before we go too far, because sometimes I tend to forget, would you mind dropping your channels so that people can find you?
Yeah, I've got a couple of pages. The Gnostic one is the godabovegod.com. And then for my main page that leads to different podcasts and my Elvis book and other books, it's just miguelconner.com. So either one of those will lead you to where you need to go, including social media and so forth.
I love that, dude. The fact that you wrote a book about Elvis Presley. I was in Cleveland, Ohio 2 years ago for a wedding, and we went to the Rock and Roll Museum. And there's an entire room of Elvis. Have you seen it in person?
No, I haven't had the pleasure.
You should definitely go, because in the Elvis room, and it's massive too, right? In the Elvis room, there's a whole wall of his esoteric and Gnostic obsessions
Hmm.
and personal trinkets that he had in his possession throughout his life. So when I saw that you were releasing your book about, the occult Elvis information, I was just like, oh, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah, I've been to Graceland, and you can find those books right there. And yeah, Elvis himself was a big ufology guy. He was ahead of the curve. He had sophisticated views in the early 60s, and he experienced three extraterrestrial events, if you know. So he'd be right at home with us, if you know what I mean, because that was his thing, understanding the intersection of UFO, religion, mysticism, ancient astronaut, all that stuff. And again, he was as I said, he's a very sophisticated thinker. He speculated without having to, you know, commit to a different one. And he thought, the little green men with combustion engines wasn't it. It was something much more complicated.
Yes, absolutely. Let's peel that back, right? So the God above God. Let's talk about that.
That's actually a term that a Orthodox theologian came up with, Paul Tillich. And when describing the Gnostics, he was talking about how they believed in a God above God. In other words, we here on planet Earth have been conditioned to worship or think that the supreme being is this Yahweh or Allah or Indra and so forth, the creator God, the God that manages our universe. And the Gnostics posited, no, this God was at his best inferior. At his worst, he was demonic, and above them was a even higher God, which was more of the font of consciousness, undivided consciousness, the ground of being, the source of everything. And that's sort of the deity that the Gnostics were, you might say, trying to reach, trying to make contact with and experience.
Something I'm very fascinated about pertaining to the Gnostics is the through line to the mystery traditions of ancient Egypt, India, Greece, Persia, all that good stuff. So I want to get into some of that today because when we last chat, we had a pretty epic conversation about that stuff, and I'm just like really seeking to sort of expand that connection. So, what are you? Let's just go from there. I'm curious to know like how you got into Gnosticism, how where you were at before in your life, what led you to finding this viewpoint and ultimately accepting it. Um,
It's a
just
good,
all of
well,
it.
it's a good, perfect to start with Egypt because indeed, as most scholars now are agreeing, Gnosticism is an Egyptian religion. It was a continuation of the ancient Egyptian mysteries, that shamanism in the desert in Upper Egypt and so forth. And it, eventually, as the theory goes, there were these ancient shamanistic Egyptian mysteries, and in the Greco-Roman world, new religions were being pushed by these other empires, and these priests sort of handed it down to pagans and probably Hellenistic Jews and so forth. And they eventually, and evolved into what we call classical Gnosticism. But it is without a doubt an Egyptian religion by the rituals, by the iconography, by the myths, so much. And that's certainly, it's very important to understand because most mainstream people and preachers still go, well, it's just a Christian heresy. It's like, no, not really. It's older. It's a very primordial form of shamanism, ecstatic religion that tends to be very intellectual, speculative, because it was informed by Greek thought and so forth. So that's where we can start with the origins of Gnosticism. And as for me, I mean, like many people, I've always been a seeker. I often call myself a spiritual hitchhiker, trying to look for answers. I've done everything. I was raised Roman Catholic, but I've tried evangelical Christianity, atheism, Hinduism, Buddhism, I mean, New Age. I've tried it all. And when I encounter Gnosticism, probably in my mid to late 30s, I found a system that worked for me that helped me understand, the bigger questions. Where do we come from? What's the source of evil? What's the nature of reality? And it just worked for me. I mean, your mileage may vary, and all systems have holes in them. There's no perfect logical system. And I often think, mysticism isn't supposed to be logical. It's supposed to be experiential and help you understand and grow as a human being and have contact behind the veil. And again, Gnosticism, it just worked for me. And since then, I've been studying it and learning it, and again, trying to experience what the Gnostics experienced thousands of years ago.
It does seem kind of like the ultimate package the more you start to pull it apart, right? I kind of feel like in the ancient past, before the great empire of the church, I think it was a time where people were just exploring these mysteries and they were connecting with these other cultures and temples and other, you know, nations, and they were transmitting their knowledge freely with one another. And my hunch tells me that Gnosticism is so important because historically it was that last movement that was happening, including, like with Jesus being a part of it, learning from these other traditions, coming and starting to give this information to the masses, crowd of 5,000 people. The authorities say, uh-oh, something's looking not so good here. We got to put a stop to this. And the rest is history, right? So I feel like Gnosticism is that piece of the puzzle that shows when the mystery traditions were suppressed underground. You
Oh,
know what I mean?
exactly. No doubt. No doubt. Because, I mean, you have the mystery. I mean, you have like two sides, right? You've got the cultural religions, the outward religions, sacrifice to the gods, learn your ethics, yada, yada, yada. Then you have the religions or the spirituality that satisfies those who want to go on an inner quest, those who want to understand the nature of reality, travel the different dimensions, and so forth. And that's, answered by the mystery religions, shamanism, that group. And Gnosticism is part of that group. But unfortunately, if you want to have a organized religion, if you want to have a proper culture, where the trains run on time and you go to mass at noon on Sundays and everybody behaves in the family, these sort of ancient anarchist chaos religions can be very dangerous. They either need to be completely taken off the board or kind of put away, like the Greeks did with the mystery religions. Okay, but you're going to go over here and just stay away from the cities kind of thing. And that's what Gnosticism is, because there are two streams, Ryan. One is the idea of the ancient Egyptian myth of Atum, one of the oldest myths. You have this chaos serpent that comes out of the chaos, Atum. And he sort of gives birth to these gods who become order. And then the Gnostic myths, that you see them following this pattern. They change the names, but it's the same pattern. It's consciousness coming alive and asking questions of what it is. And individuated consciousness becomes fragmented in the form of gods, humans, and creation and all that. On the other hand, you have these ancient myths of Ashera in the Middle East, and these are the times of Solomon and so forth, when the Hebrews and other people around that area in Egypt were more shamanistic, they were more animistic and more magical, but they're dealing with these forces of chaos, Ashera, Anat, Tiamat, and so forth, because that's part of humanity. There's law and chaos, and the chaos, the lunar powers, the feminine powers, the magical powers, which manifest often in serpents. The Gnostics, of course, as you've seen, were obsessed with serpent worship. There's serpents everywhere. So you have these two forces that come in, primordial, chaos forces, but they get suppressed because, again, if you want to have a good civilization, you can't have these powers all over the place. It'll be, things will be chaos. So they get suppressed, they get put underground, and it's that Gnostic current that is smuggling these arcane eldritch powers of Ashera and Tiamat and Atum and so forth, and keeping these traditions and these spirits and these rituals alive. And of course they clothe them in, second, third century as Sophia and the Aeons and the Archons and all that, but they keep smuggling it. And, the great empires are playing whack-a-mole, like, oh, Gnostics, crush them here. Oh, no, crush them here. Throughout history with the Kabbalists and the Cathars and the Sufis. But that is what's happening. And that's what I like about Gnosticism, because, Ryan, for us to survive as a species, we've had 2,000 years. Let's be realistic. We probably are at the brink of extinction as humans. I think balance needs to come back. We need to bring back these powers of chaos, the goddess, the magical, so we can balance, because we've gone too left brain as a culture. And we are unbalanced. We're disconnected from nature. We're disconnected from the denizens of the stars, from the other dimensions, stuff that was natural thousands of years ago. And for me, Gnosticism is one of those solutions that could bring this back, that gnosis. And I hope I'm not going on a rant. And
No, I'm sitting here. My brain is smiling big time. I just feel like what an honor to be able to have this conversation on my show, with someone who I've been a fan of for many years. I don't know why in the world I haven't reached out sooner. I just think sometimes you think things are out of reach, and also I want to say that I completely agree with everything you said about bringing the goddess power back. And I am happy to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about, but I kind of want to focus more on you and your perspective for this part, because we may or may not have talked about doing a part 2 on a really cool show called Aeon Byte Radio, where I come in and, talk a little bit about my stories and my family's interactions with the goddess. So I think that could be a cool follow-up. So I'm going to try not to go too deep into my own stuff today. Right. But okay, let me unpack this. So you just exposed me to a perspective that is a little new to me, and I'm here for it. I had no clue that Atum was the symbol of the serpent. I didn't know that. And I think that's very interesting. And lately I've been, diving more into Gnosticism, um, and just really excited to pull this apart, but it's huge. It's a big body of knowledge to start. It's a way of life, honestly.
Mhm.
It's not just like, oh, cool, and move on. Like, no, to really understand this, it takes time. It takes intuition to follow these threads. But something that does speak out to me is this idea of the serpent symbolism. So I liked what you said about how in the times of ancient Egypt, they had the symbols of Atum, and even in Babylon, they had Tiamat. And it's pretty evident that serpent symbolism is important, right? You have the story of the Garden of Eden. Of
Mhm.
course, they spin that as negative or evil.
Yeah.
But as you and I know, that's an allegory, right? But then they also have the stories of, like, for example, Moses when he has his brass staff and the serpent
Yeah.
goes up. We have Kundalini. There's so many things that jump out with this serpent symbolism being much more than meets the eye. So I'm curious what you would say to people who may be, typically Christian or otherwise, who are afraid of this symbolism. How would you dispel the fear and sort of, help them understand that this is universal?
Yeah, God, I wouldn't even tell them to dispel the fear because different cultures have different reactions to archetypal images. My wife is Roman Catholic. One time we did ayahuasca,
Nice.
and there was a vision of a serpent. So of course, I'm like, "Oh, baby," and she's like, and that's fine. We both had a lesson to learn because she thinks, again, the serpent of the garden is negative. Obviously, as the Gnostic said, the serpent in the garden was more than likely Jesus or some benign being. And again, the serpent was there. But again, I don't think it's not about good and evil. It's just about, again, left and right. The Taoist symbol of balance. As Jung said, we all cast a shadow, the great Gnostic Carl Jung. And
Mhm.
until we see the dark side of our yin and yang, we can't have wholeness, completion. We have to integrate our shadow. So these powers are there, call them chaos, darkness, and the serpent is part of it. And of course, in ancient times, the serpent was considered an important part of the culture and the psyche of both the gods and the humans. Serpents are healing creatures, they're magical creatures, they're nighttime creatures, they're lunar creatures. And even in ancient Alexandria, there was this being called the daimon, and everybody would put this serpent, at their doorway, at the gates, because he was a protector of humanity, especially at the night. And the Gnostics were just going gaga over the serpent, again, taking from these ancient shamanistic traditions. They had sex like the Ophites, which is Greek for serpent, where the serpent would come out from a basket and the priest or priestess would kiss it in the mouth, and they would do these rituals, travel the heavens, and sometimes they're negative serpents. Remember, Apophis in Egyptian lore is the chaos serpent, but he's not the nurturer like Atum. He's like I'm going to destroy you. I'm Kali. I am Wotan. I'm the part of the serpent that really enjoys destruction. And these Ophites had to travel the astral planes, and others like the Nessenes were also talked about a serpent. Again, that's also Greek or Hebrew for serpent. So you see this. You see this imagery and this vibe all through many of the Gnostic texts. And again, talking about completion, the Ouroboros, that's very much a Hermetic Gnostic text. The idea of the serpent going around, which represents the wheel of karma, of rebirth. And the thing about Gnostics is there's the old saying: if you get two people in the room and they both you get two Gnostics in a room and they both agree, then one of them isn't a Gnostic, because speculation and disagreeing was always part of it, because the Gnostics were never part of one group. It was little sects that would attach themselves to different religions and cultures and have their own ideas. Some Gnostics thought, no, the Ouroboros is evil because, like the Buddhists, who are cousins of the Gnostics, reincarnation is like eternal damnation. Who wants to go through creation having your memory wiped every lifetime and having to start over until you remember it? So it depended, but it's all there.
I'm curious what your take on this is, but I had an interesting sort of meditative experience one time, and it may mean nothing. I think sometimes when we get into expanded states of consciousness, the information can present itself as feelings, images, archetypes, and then we try to put it into words, and sometimes we fail, and that's fine. But I had this sort of vision flash in my mind of the word Osiris. And I'm a big, I love the symbolism of Osiris. I've had multiple dreams that he came in and it totally changed my life. So when Osiris is a Greek word, but it's an Egyptian deity, right? So the Egyptian word is Us, U-S. Okay. So I kind of saw this presentation of like there's this O, there's these squiggly S's. If you look at the word Osiris, it looks like just a bunch of little squiggly lines. And in some weird way beyond our modern understanding, it was like this is like serpentine symbolism from the Greek language. And then the words just kept coming through to me, serpent of the sun. So I'm like, I have no idea what that means. But I'm curious what your take is on that.
Well, I would say, yeah, words will fail us. We got to go. Even the Gospel of Philip says, you must go through the image to enter into the divine realm. That's the only way. Words, we're limited by language, we're limited by time. William Burroughs, who himself called himself a Gnostic, hugely influenced by Gnosticism, used to say that time and language are actually two archons that were created by the powers that be to keep us trapped. They're not good. Language, that's why he used to mess with language so much, because that's what's keeping us in these sort of meat sack, self-destructive ways. So, but yeah, Osiris obviously represents I see him as the great shaman, because in shamanistic traditions, when you are initiated, you go into the spirit world, and one of the things that happens is that the spirits will tear you apart. They will chop you up and then put you back together in a new form, and you come back as the shaman of the tribe. So Osiris is this great lesson of the shamanistic way, the one who stands in life and death, sun and moon. And again, I still stress that Gnosticism is at its core shamanistic. It's easy to understand, but most people don't get it because, okay, let me explain. Have you ever wondered why Gnosticism is called a parasitic religion? It appears as Christian Gnosticism, pagan, Sufism, Kabbalah, Cathar. It just seems to come up, right? And fundamentalist preachers and right-wing ideologues like James Lindsay it's a parasitic. It's there to corrupt. And I go, no, because it's what you call a spiritual modality or a metaphysical orientation, like shamanism or exorcism, right? There is no church of the shaman, right? It can't exist. There is no church of the exorcism. These spiritual modalities have to exist within a culture by definition. That's why you have Siberian shamanism, Peruvian, Taoist shamanism. Same with exorcism. It has to appear in Catholicism or Japanese or Jewish exorcism. Yes, these modalities will have their own mythology, ideals, all that, but they have to exist within a culture by definition. So when people say, it's a false religion, Gnosticism, or no, because it's not a religion. It's a way of thinking, of seeing the world, and it needs a culture around it to
Makes
work.
sense.
The
Yeah.
Egyptians would say Osiris is our, or Hermes is our leader. The Christians would say, well, Jesus is, and so forth. So, and I always say, yeah, Gnosticism is actually sort of a fusion of exorcism and shamanism because it believes in altered states of mind, traveling the world. It believes that we all have some mind parasite and that we're ruled by these evil beings that control the universe called the archons. We have to exorcise them from both our body and space, so because we're trapped in fate. Gnosticism is, I call it also shamanism for the individual because it just posits that there's not one shaman for the tribe. There can be as many as you want. We have power over the spirits and the illusion that they've cast within us. And within us, we share the essence of Atum or the God above God or the One. And our mission is to wake up to our reality, to our potential, and to be able to travel the universe and the world and heal everybody around us and help them wake up. So again, I hope I didn't go too much in a tangent, but it's always hard people to understand the idea that Gnosticism is not a philosophy, it's not a religion, it's a spiritual modality.
I I I like to think about it like, yeah, it's not a religion, obviously, but also it keeps popping up in the way that it does throughout history because it's universal, and universal wisdom and truth resonates, and it doesn't need a vehicle other than expression,
Hmm.
right? Like it
Exactly.
just to be used. It does, or let me rephrase that. It doesn't require belief. It doesn't require worship. It doesn't require commitment or oblation, like, oaths of loyalty and things like that, because it's just universal truth. And it is the human condition, right? That we are born here. We are multidimensional beings.
Hmm.
There are aspects of ourself that exist in many different dimensions, like the molecular dimension, the mental and spiritual dimensions, the physical, the chemical. We have cells and little bloods
Right.
and molecules, and we exist in so many different dimensions at once. And I think that, like, in the modern Christian paradigm, people don't think about the multidimensional nature. They're either like, you know, alive or dead, heaven or hell. You know, maybe it's more complicated.
Yeah.
Maybe it is like we are these eternal beings coming here over and over again in this little trap until we wake up to our true multidimensional nature and reclaim that power to go where we want to go. So,
That's it. That's it. And it starts, the Gnostics would say it starts with the dictum at the temple of Adelphi. Know thyself. Know thyself. That's what we're here for, is to understand who we are beyond the programming, the delusions, whether it was archons or society or our own egos. And once we know ourselves, we know that we are, as the Gnostics would say, we're higher than the gods, we're higher than the institutions of this world, and we are, astral beings without who are limitless in potential. But it all starts with knowing thyself, and that's shared through it. You have that quote in Buddhism and other religions, knowing thyself. And it's not, well, I'm a Taurus and I like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain. No, it's who you are at your depth, at your most essential core, and what your mission is. Once you know yourself, then you will know God, as Elaine Pagel said, and you will know what your destiny is in this world. I always like this quote by William T. Volman in the New York Times. He wrote, as a corpus, the Gnostic scriptures are nearly incoherent. He's right. Like a crowd of sages, mystics, and madmen all speaking at once. But always they call upon us to know ourselves. That's it. Who we are is the most important question. And that's, again, very shamanistic.
interesting. Let's talk about that goddess power, right? Because from the where, or like the position that I'm sitting, it also looks like Gnosticism, just giving my take here, was probably the correct version of the history of Jesus. So if you have a beating heart and a brain and you have two neurons firing to, create thoughts in your head, you probably can look at this data and realize why the church or the authorities, because at the time there was no church, right? Why they would suppress this movement and wipe it out from history, because it's too empowering. No, we need you to be victims to our structure and pay us, and you're going to go to hell unless you, say X, Y, and Z and do X, Y, and Z. And also, if you pay an extra premium this month, we'll start taking a little bit off of the time in purgatory for your old Uncle Morris or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's pretty obvious why they would suppress this movement. Um,
Yeah, that goes
yeah,
before the church. I mean, again, look at the Sumerian myth. You got Marduk defeating Tiamat, and Marduk is a lord of civilization. And again, for civilization to exist, and that's a rule, you have to suppress the lunar, the chaos, the magical, the feminine, because if you want trains to run on time and the crops to grow and all that, it has to be solar. Unfortunately, all civilizations depend on slavery and other injustices, warfare. See the imbalance there? And Marduk became the symbol, the solar power, even before Christianity. And some have said very well that who the God of the Old Testament is not really Yahweh, it's Marduk. He got exported out of Babylon when the Jews went back to Jerusalem, and they discovered this sort of solar power for their own civilization. So the suppression, as you say, that's way before the Catholic Church came around. I mean, you see it, just the God is being suppressed. The serpents are being suppressed. The magic is being suppressed. I mean, the Roman Empire was one of the worst empires when it came to magic. They made it illegal, or you just had to pay a lot of money to do a lot of taxes to do magic. So you
Wow.
see this. So that's the question. Do you want civilization, or do you want how it was before? This more holistic, maybe free but sort of dangerous way of life. I'm sure there's a solution way through where we can have balance without one getting too out of hand.
Yeah, I love that. I really do believe that this whole movement into the age of Aquarius that we are living to witness firsthand is kind of like a reemergence of that Atlantean way.
Hmm.
That there's going to be, I genuinely believe that in this new age that we are on the cusp of entering, that there will be a movement towards utopian civilization. And a lot of people get upset about this. They get twisted up in knots because Hollywood movies are so frightening. I really do think technology, AI, robotics, things like this have a part to play with this, because our technology will get to a level to where it can handle a lot of things that we really don't need to be wasting our time doing, and we can focus on spiritual things. And there's going to be this equidistant increase of like technology and ESP and spiritual heights
Hmm.
being reached. That's just my belief, right? That when I picture Atlantis, that's what I think. Psychic abilities unfolding, technology being able to do a lot of stuff for us. But anyway, so from where I'm sitting, it looks like Gnosticism is also the through line that connects the goddess to Jesus. Because if you think about every tradition from the ancient past, there's a goddess in some form, whether it's Buddhism or not Buddhism, but esoteric Buddhism or Hinduism or even Judaism. All these traditions have goddesses, like pretty much any, except for Christianity. So let's
Yeah.
talk about goddess power.
Goddess power. No, that's for sure. I mean, the Gnostics again were smuggling these ancient traditions, Ashira, Anat, the goddesses from Egypt. Again, this feminine power, as Jung would call it, the anima, the magical, the lunar, and they thought it was essential for the survival of humanity, at least, or at least as a vehicle to understand the higher worlds, the other dimensions, if you would. So they were very goddess centric. I mean, they of course the main one would be Sophia, the fallen goddess or mercurial goddess in many of their myths, but they had many more. They had Barbelo, Pernicos, and in fact, I even go on my show. I think I can name you like 10 Gnostic sects, including the Mandeans, who are today, and they're all founded by women. They all had women leaders because the Gnostics felt in our little groups, it really doesn't matter what your gender was, it's were you capable of doing the job? Were you spiritually awake? To the Gnostics, of all these women that were leaders and community leaders and religious leaders, the main one would be Mary Magdalene. They saw her as what does one Jesus call her in this Nag Hammadi Library dialogue of the Savior? The woman who knew the all, the woman who understood completely. She was the main disciple of Jesus because she knew what he was trying to teach, and she saw it. She saw the universe. She saw the veil open. And she became, in the Gnostic sects, one of the biggest teachers and mystics. She has her own gospel, the Gospel of Mary. She appears in many of the Gnostic texts as, again, Jesus's right-hand woman or person, I don't know what to call it. And she herself is teaching these mysteries, these ancient mysteries to all. And some Gnostic texts say, in the myths, you have the higher world. You've got Sophia and Logos, Jesus and Logos. You've got wisdom and divine reason. That's the balance. That's part of the true God's mind, and it emanates and materializes down here on earth as Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or Osiris and Isis, or Simon Magus and Ellen, and they are the manifestation of wisdom and divine reason here in this world, and that's what they're trying to teach us, because these forces exist within us. We both have divine reason and wisdom within us. So the divine feminine is extremely important in Gnostic texts throughout history, you would say.
Do you get the sense that this whole goddess like manifestation is just one universal thing, and it's all of these different people just with their different language and understanding sort of ascribing definition to this universal thing?
That's a good question. I always try to say, I don't know if I don't want to put Gnosticism into perennialism, because I think it's a lot more dangerous. I think we are talking really primordial ego destruction, self destruction, society destruction forces. Again, that's why they keep the shamans on the side of the village and the witch, because they are an integral part of a society, because you want those lunar powers, but they are very dangerous. They're not to keep us civilized. They're not to keep us. They're kind of to send us into the edge, the edge of chaos, the edge of madness. So I try not to put Gnosticism there because it has its role, but if we're going to be honest, it is very dangerous.
What specifically?
Well, I mean, all of us in our life, our ego death is a very painful realization, right? You realize that you're a phony, the society's a phony,
Yeah.
and you go deep down and you wonder, well, what's my role? Should I even come back? I mean, that's what the mystery religions and even the Gnostic rituals do, and shamanic rituals do. You go down into the underworld and you have to face these demons or these archons or these monsters or, the dragon in fairy tales, right? And these things will, like Osiris, they will tear you apart. They will show you your worst fears. They will deconstruct your psyche, and it's up to you if you can survive and put yourself together as a new being and come out. And then you get to go out into the heavenly realms, and then you get to come back to Earth as a new being. It's alchemy. You have a new substance from all this destruction, nigredo, rubredo. And that is dangerous. Some people don't come back. And if you come back, you're going to be very different to who people thought you were and your society and everything else. And you will probably be called a rebel. And guess what? You're going to have the same fate as Jesus. So it is dangerous, but that's the hero's journey, right? You leave, you come back, and you come back with useful information for your tribe. But sometimes the tribe just wants the status quo, right? They don't want change, and you're going to be on a cross or somewhere else. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, these lunar powers are dangerous. Tiamat is dangerous, but it's important for balance. That's the key.
Yeah. I think of it like a fire, right? So a fire can peel your flesh off and destroy you and burn your house down, but it can also do so many other amazing things, like energy and create warmth and safety and comfort and cook food. And, it's a balance, right? Like these forces are universal and they can be used for good and they can be used for bad. And I think you're right that for the, so to speak, uninitiated, it is very dangerous to encroach these territories. And I think of the symbolism of the sword of Excalibur, or the hammer of Thor, like whoever shall be worthy may wield this hammer, and that's kind of saying what you're saying, that like you got a narrow road to walk, right?
Yeah, and the technology part is, brilliantly said, because that was one of the obsessions. I mean, to me, Gnosticism works because it just fits this culmination of humanity that we're going through. Simulation, archons and extraterrestrials, the quest for, who am I and my shadow, which is so popular today, and technology. That was something the Gnostics were warning about or describing, because they certainly quoted the Book of Enoch, and they talked about the Book of Enoch. The story, the Watchers come and they provide technology to humanity, and this technology is it can make us go beyond being humans, but it can also enslave us. And of course, you've got the great myth of Prometheus, another very Gnostic tale where, just like the archons, Zeus tells Prometheus, "I need some slaves." So he creates humanity, but then Prometheus feels bad for humanity, so he goes and with Athena, that's what people forget. You got Prometheus, divine reason, Athena, wisdom. They
Yeah.
both go together to get the fire. They bring it to humans. Will humans be burned or use this fire for good reason? So you see that in the book of Enoch, you see that in the myth of Prometheus. Obviously, what's the Anunnaki? You have the same story. Humans created as slaves, but it's is it Enki, I believe, who feels sorry and wants to help him out. So this story is they're over and
Garden of
over these
Eden.
higher beings giving us this technology, and us, whether we're going to use it right or is it going to take us into extinction at the very end. And in fact, there was the famous alchemist Zosimos of Panopolis, and he was a Gnostic, one of the fathers of alchemy, and he used to say, yeah, these archons, he called them archons, he called them Nephilim, whatever. They stole the technology from God and they brought it down to earth, and they're using it to enslave humanity. But he always said, they stole it from God. So therefore, all technology originally went from God. So therefore, if we humans can become holy and enlightened and awaken, we can use that technology for our own benefit and use it to overthrow the archons. So
Yes, that's what I believe.
mhm.
I do believe that because a part of the, archon, so to speak, and I know that's just a word that was established in, I guess, the first century or whenever Gnosticism was popping up in a Christian context. I like to think of it as just like the Matrix, it's like this evil control system here. And it says every year it holds its hand out and it says, this is what you owe in taxes, and you got to pay your mortgage for 30 years. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I could spend an hour talking about the poison in our foods and in our pesticides. And, oh, you feel a little anxious? Here, take these medications. It's just an evil system. This world really is corrupt.
It is.
And I believe that technology, especially in the AI robotic sense, could eventually, this is just me trying to imagine a better future, because at the end of the day, it is here and it's not going anywhere. So I'd rather be positive about it than live in fear for, really no reason. So I just am envisioning a future where it's like the Jetsons, right? What would you like for breakfast this morning, Mr. Miguel? Oh, how about, toast with butter on it? Thank you, Robot Martha. You know what I mean? And you're out the door. You're going to go do a podcast or whatever. And like these mundane things, eventually we hopefully won't have to think about or worry about or do anymore. That's just my belief that, it can be used for good.
Yeah, I mean, and the Gnostics would say, don't try to criticize the technology. Wake up first. Have you reached your potential? Have you cleaned the technology that is your body and your psyche? That's the way you win. You go inward and you wake up. Everything makes sense. When in the Nag Hammadi library, the Gnostic treasure trove that was discovered in 1945, Ryan, they have a piece of Plato's Republic. What's in Plato's Republic? The famous allegory of the cave, the first Gnostic story in history, hundreds of years. And that's why I keep saying the Gnostics weren't inventing stuff. They weren't like writing fan fiction or anything. They were like, let's look at Plato's cave. Oh, we are trapped in illusion. Oh, the Anunnaki. We are trapped by the Anunnaki. Zeus and the Olympians, the Nephilim, all these myths around the Middle East and Europe, even in South America and they have these myths of these controlling gods from the stars and how we must escape them or at least become superior to them. So they were looking at all these myths and simply, maybe dialing them up to 11, and that's what they were expressing to the world. And I think they're right. I mean, even Paul in the New Testament, if you take off your Sunday school glasses, you realize Paul is talking Gnosticism. That's what David Bentley Hart, the great Greek Orthodox theologian, has found out, because in Paul is talking about what? The rulers, archons in Greek, powers and principalities, the God of this world, how this is a fallen world. And he says the only thing that can help us from the yoke of this demiurge is Jesus coming and sort of awakening us. So it's all in the stories, these ancient stories. And I think it's all part, it is true. And like you said, it got suppressed because you don't want a religion when you realize that your gods are the bad guys and that the universe, we have a lot of work to do. It's easier to tell your flock, have faith, everything's going to be okay. It's not so bad. This universe is just wonderful and all that. And I think the Gnostics bring a little balance because they show, well, yes, there is holiness in this universe, but there's also darkness, and most religions don't spend enough time with their own darkness or the darkness out there, and instead they blame their congregants or something.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I remember growing up a Pentecostal holiness Christian, and just like every night when I would go to sleep, in my teenage years, I'd be praying, please, if I die in my sleep tonight, I don't want to go to hell tomorrow.
Me too.
Or, if anything happens, or riding in a car, what if I drive off a cliff? I don't want to go to hell. You know what I mean? So
you die before you masturbate, after you masturbate.
just these thoughts, right? Like, what if I die and I'm not prayed up and all that? So I think that it's a little bit of an existential shock for people to find out that it's not that simple, but that heaven and hell are constant states of being eternally. Mm-hmm. And it's right now. And you have to choose which one of these frequencies you align to by your choices, your good thoughts, your good words, your good deeds, or bad thoughts, bad words, bad deeds. And I think like every second, your being is constantly being re-rendered. I mean, even cells die. They have mitosis. They split, apoptosis. Cells die. They eat themselves. They're reborn. They multiply. So like at every single present moment, your being is transforming. And that's kind of like in the Matrix when he has the red pill and the blue pill. You take the red pill, you wake up. You take the blue pill, you go back to sleep. And I kind of think that's a deeper metaphor of constantly making choices at these karmic pathways of destiny for your being to awaken and it to unfold, to higher and higher levels. So I think that's a bit of a shock when people find out, oh, I'm probably kind of in hell now, metaphorically speaking. Right. So I have to kind of like do something about it to wake up. I have to like, not just like sniff cocaine on a Saturday night and, hang out with hookers and do all this stuff and then go to church Sunday morning and I'm good for the week because I said, praise Jesus. But I have to actually be like Christ.
Right.
That's a little hard.
Yeah. And that's what the Gnostic texts say. It said you don't wait for the resurrection to be like Jesus. You have to be resurrected while you're alive, and you have to become Christ, that light, that logos. I mean, very specific. It's here and it's now. And of course, every time that you are reborn or you become something new, something has to die. I think that's what I was saying. It's dangerous because we don't want to let go of our old selves. We don't want to let go of our childhood or childish things. We want to hold on to them, but they have to die for something new to be reborn. So it's a very hard challenge. It's not easy, but it is the way out.
Yeah.
Oh, and I wanted to say, Elvis was also raised as a Pentecostal, and same reasons. He got into alternative spirituality, occultism, whatever you call it, because he got tired. He was denounced by other Christians like, Billy Graham and his own pastor when he got famous as being in league with Satan. But he also he was already convinced as a teenager that there was reincarnation, logical. He was obviously had his own mystic powers, and he got tired of the whole hellfire story. He did not like he didn't like the God of fear of the Old Testament. So he just said, I'm going to delve into my own sort of Christianity. And that's when he started, reading Gnostic texts and, going into theosophy and Manly P. Hall, the mystic Christ literature that you find there. So
yeah,
he had a similar journey as you did.
I love Elvis, man. My wife was actually born in Bad Nauheim, Germany, which is where Elvis was stationed when he was in the army.
Wow.
And every year, I think it's like the week after my birthday, they have a festival there. So
Mhm.
I haven't been to it. We never go at that specific time, but there's like statues of Elvis all over the town. So he's like a superstar in Germany because he lived there for years and he met
Right.
Priscilla there. So all my German in-laws, they're just obsessed with Elvis. So I feel a strong connection to Elvis because of that. And it was really cool to see his journey, right? How he's into all this, Gnostic and esoteric stuff and Eastern mysticism and things like that. But
Yeah.
something I'm really fascinated about, and I kind of know very little, is Abraxas.
Yes. Now we're still on dangerous ground. Well, that's the mystery. Abraxas is a very mysterious, ancient, and very powerful deity entity, and there's different versions of him. It's hard to put your finger on him. Obviously, for if people are watching it, pull him up. He's this depiction of this humanoid creature, head of a rooster or a falcon, and snake legs, and holding a shield and he's usually a whip on a chariot. And Abraxas probably again has Egyptian roots because one thing when you see beings with animal heads or anything like that, that is 100% an Egyptian characteristic. It's what the Egyptians did. We're going to give him the head of an animal. And he might be based on Typhon, which is based on Set, because Typhon is the Greek version of Set. Again, a god of chaos, the desert, but also the god of the outcast and the immigrant, kind of this, James Dean god, for lack of a better word, out there in the edges of town.
Uh-huh.
And Typhon was also depicted as having snake legs. So Abraxas appears mainly in Gnostic gems with, again, markings and
Yeah.
depictions.
Little
And
coins. They had
yeah,
coins.
yes, and they're very rare, very expensive. You can get fake ones on the internet, but they either use them to keep them away because often the power of the gods is too much, and you want the gods to just leave you alone, so breathing room. Or there are invocations of Abraxas, like stopping a pandemic, and in Roman times, London, and so forth. So they used them for magical things. As far as depictions, there is a Gnostic called Basilides in the second century, and he had a system where, get this, there weren't like seven dimensions, or anything. There was 365 dimensions that you could go up to get to the true God, the one, the undivided consciousness. And at the bottom, the Yahweh, the Hebrew God, ruled this planet. So you go through, think about like a video game. You got one boss. Now you got 365 bosses, and at the top of all the dimensions was Abraxas, and he's still what. I don't know. It's not. Was he the god, or was he actually the final boss before you got to nothing, to nirvana, whatever you want to call it? So that's one place where you see Abraxas, and then some of the Gnostic writings depict him as either sort of an archon, part of the cosmic lore. They don't agree, but all of that is, yeah, it's still pretty mysterious. And then, of course, he appears throughout history in wizard books and grimoires, and probably the most interesting one is the Knights Templar. Guess who guarded their treasure? An Abraxas medallion. They would put
Yeah.
an Abraxas. That it's sort of a giveaway what they were into, but we know that 100% historically, all scholars agree the Knights Templar used Abraxas to guard their treasure, and he appears again throughout history and different. But he's very mysterious. I know Pete. I think Pete Carroll always said that for chaos magic, they chose Baphomet, but they eventually Abraxas was in the running to be their god, this sort of mysterious, multi-dimensional, chaotic sort of being, but they went with Baphomet. So, in a nutshell, that's what Abraxas is to Jung. Carl Jung wrote a lot about Abraxas in his Black books, and to him, he was a negative figure. He was karma. He was force. He's what kept the universe running and together, but Jung ultimately saw him as a negative being you needed to avoid because he was looking for transcendence, and Abraxas stops everything because he runs the entire universe. He runs God, he runs Satan, he runs everything, and he keeps everything in order. And he is everything at the same time.
So I'm a little confused. So, and I know you've covered all this, but I'm summarizing to understand, trying to peel it back a little more clearly. So Abraxas was not necessarily believed by the Gnostics to be the true God above God, but rather...
It's again, there's contradictions because remember, Ryan, a lot of what I'm telling you is what church fathers were writing about. We don't, because it got so wiped out, the church fathers got to dictate history. So you have one church father saying, well, no, to Basilides and the Gnostics, he's the God, or the ultimate God. But then you have another church father saying, no, he's the head of the archon. So that's the problem, is we don't have just like we don't have the writings of Jesus, we don't have a lot of writings of these Gnostics or even their texts. So, and when he appears in the text, it's also kind of muddy. And sometimes I wonder it's on purpose. You don't want writing the name Abraxas is, you're already asking for these powers to come down. So they kind of keep it murky, if you know what I mean.
I see what you're saying. Kind of like how the Hebrews would put GD and they would leave out the vowels.
Yes,
they don't want to bind it necessarily to paper and write too much about it and transmit too much about it. I understand.
Bingo. Okay. So Abraxas was certainly very, very powerful, but also somebody you don't mess with.
Yeah. No, I that's perfect. My understanding of God, and I want to get into your understanding too, but my understanding of God is like Amun Ra, like it is everything that is visible and invisible, that we exist within the body of God, metaphorically speaking, but also that that body even manifests from God in a higher place. Like it's just many different layers and dimensions of emanation. Or, I like to think about it like we exist in the mind of God and we're all just little thoughts and we're little fractal representations of it's like one mind. And then that from that one mind, everything else spirals from, so it's like there is truly one thing. There is one God. But then my understanding is that when God expresses itself as a manifest being, it is the lady. It is the Sophia. It is Hathor. It's the goddess. Mm-hmm. And that when mortals in this material world need comfort or love or reassurance from a higher power, that it appears as this loving, nurturing, beautiful woman. It says Jesus said, I send a comforter after me. Mm-hmm. Well, I know I said I wouldn't talk too much about the lady in this episode. We're going to save it for Aeon Bite. But something she told my father was that she was the comforter. She was the Holy Spirit and the missing secret part of the Holy Trinity. So that's kind of my belief, is like you have the Father and the Mother, but the Father is invisible and is hidden and is not like a personified being, but it is the intelligence of everything that has ever existed. But then the personified aspect of God is the Mother, the lady. So What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, agreed 100%. Yeah, you watch my Halloween special, that movie by Darren Aronofsky, Mother. That kind of shows that the mother is the womb or the platform that keeps these energies going, and God is just playing around, being a boy, but she is the one that really keeps everything in harmony and everything that matters. And yeah, the Gnostics certainly and early Christians portrayed the Holy Spirit as feminine. That was no secret. They did that because they saw her as the comforter, and also the Gnostics agreed with the Jews or the Hebrews about the Shekinah, the lost wisdom of God that we have rejected, but she's still going around trying to help us out. I mean, the book of Enoch itself says, wisdom came down to the world, but men rejected it. So she went back to heaven. But she's still waiting. Sophia's still out there, this being trying to help us. As scholars have said, as soon as the world fell or evil came into the world, or it became, like you said, it emanated to the point we forgot who we were and we became trapped, whether it's we forgot or some other being trapped, it doesn't matter. It's still the same process. Sophia started a rescue operation, which is to bring her children back home. And it's a beautiful metaphor that if we are wise, we get to go back home. The ancients used to talk about wisdom a lot. Notice you're never going to see a politician or a rock star, we must be wiser. That's done on purpose because we know that the way out is to get wisdom back, to get her this divine being, and the Gnostics portray this in so many of their scriptures. And I love the part about the comforting, because in some of the Gnostic myths, it's very much like the Hindu myths. You have undivided consciousness, right? In Hinduism, you've got Shiva. And at some point, undivided unconsciousness goes, who am I? As soon as you say, who am I, you create a division, right? A duality. It's who am I? When that happened, a being came out to sort of help this freaked out consciousness, the supreme being.
Yeah.
And it's portrayed in Gnosticism as a woman, Barbelo, or in Hinduism as a Shakti or Prakriti. And, this undivided is kind of, well, who am I? And she helps him. She goes, you are the one. And you go, who else am I? You are pure goodness. Who else? And as they're having this conversation, the universe starts to flow out, and it flows out until the gods, until the material, everything that has potential flows out with the help of this female power that kind of keeps everything together and in a state of harmony and in a state of peace. Now, of course, the Gnostics had different variations. There was a glitch. Things went wrong. Both the divine feminine and masculine forgot, and now we have to remember. So they had all these things, but this force has always been very important, and this goes throughout most of the Gnostic scriptures, like the Cathars. The Cathars, in the land where they lived, they believed there's this ancient legend in the Pyrenees about a white lady who has been there since before time, since we're talking very old pre-Bronze Age writings and tools talking about a white lady who rules this place. And she eventually got connected to Mary Magdalene and Esclairmont de Foix, the great Cathar high priestess. But this white lady is very important in the Cathar myths and later on. And of course, as we know, and your work has shown, this white lady, this Sophia, Shekinah, again, names, appears from Fatima to Guadalupe to all over the world. And she's just trying to get through, trying to make us wise and trying to tell us, get your shit together or, see what happens. Fuck around, find out,
Yeah, it's like she comforts us through the awakening process, which, as you said, is dangerous. It's scary. But you know what else is scary? Adolescence. You're 11, 12, 13-year-old boy, and all of a sudden, you look to your left, and that girl that sat by you every day at that desk is starting to look a little different. You're starting to feel a little different. Whoa, something's moving inside of me that I don't understand. And everybody goes through this. Every young boy, every young girl. We grow up and we go through adolescence, and it's uncomfortable. It's scary. It's humiliating. It's, and that's just the natural process of life moving into adulthood, right? And then we move into adulthood and we gain wisdom through experience. And I think that is a mirror image of like our spiritual journey into adulthood as well. And that process is necessary, albeit scary,
Yeah,
and
what did Rudolf Steiner say? He said, wisdom is just crystallized pain.
I've never heard that, but that's true. Yeah, it's trauma and suffering. I was having this really profound meditation the other night. I don't know if you've felt any sort of strange sensations since this 3-eye atlas passed through or anything, but I've just been feeling like extreme vibrating in my third eye and all kinds of weird sensations like ringing in my ears and stuff.
Mm.
And the other night I sort of just, as weird as this is going to sound, I just kind of popped out of body. And that's not new. Ever since going, and getting involved with the Monroe Institute and sort of that happening just that one time, it sort of opens a gateway, no pun intended. And it can just kind of happen more regularly. But anyway, so I did the other night, and it was like seeing all these fractals and seeing all these like, fractal beings and all this stuff. And this information was coming into me, and something was seeing basically that the experience of life is terror and beauty.
Mm.
It was conveyed to me that the experience is terror and beauty, that it is a balance of both, and you must experience both to grow.
Couldn't agree more. That's
And
it. We're talking light and darkness, the Taoist yin and yang, the mysterium fascinante, tremendo, light and darkness. These are things we have to harmonize, accept, and unify within ourselves. We all have a shadow, and within the cosmos. And that's certainly what the Gnostics proposed. I mean, I know people say, well, the Gnostics were world haters and talk too much. No, but they also discuss a lot of the beauty and holiness of the world, but they also don't mince words when it comes to the evil and the darkness. How these spirits, if there's a rule in the universe, is that everything eats everything, and that includes in the spiritual world. As Stephen Heller, once a Gnostic bishop, once wisely said, the first sound in the universe wasn't om, it was munch. It was like everything has to eat each other, and these beings have to feed, and they will feed. Shamans know this. These spiritual beings will feed on our loosh or our soul, or that's the economy of the entire universe. And they often, whether it's the gods or Abraxas or extraterrestrials, they don't have human morality. They appear to us as tricksters because they don't have the same morality, and they have their own agenda. And we can learn to negotiate and find their benefits. But yeah, at the end of the day, we have to accept, like you said, the universe is both light and darkness.
well, in my understanding of the cosmos, just based on interaction with beings in the visible spectrum tens of thousands of times over a period of almost 20 years now. Is that a cat I hear in the background?
Yeah, when I,
Love
I have
it.
a little kitten that wants to be with me, but
I have
I'm
two.
daddy's working.
I have two that are always trying to barge in when I'm recording, but right
Speaking of
now,
tricksters,
yeah. But there are negative parasitic entities that want to feed on people. That is true. People think there's these reptilians and these grays and these Dracos, and I say bullcrap. That it's more like the spiritual view where it's things emanating from other realities, dimensions, one could say. So there are negative entities from lower vibrational planes of existence that attach to your mind and want to feast on you, and they want to,
right?
they want to consume your energy, and they want to make you go mad and just thrive off of your fear. But then there are angelic beings too, and they come in and they intervene, and they're near to your heart, and they help when you call them, and they are good, and perhaps they are us many stages in the future advanced, where we've ascended to such a level that we can come back and appear as,
Right.
be not afraid, for I'm an angel of the Lord. You don't know, right? I mean, it could be what we're becoming through many lifetimes and stages of existence. But, there is good and there is bad. And I think it's important not to get lost in a nihilistic view, because there are angelic forces that help when we call out to them. But there are some bad ones too. There are some bad beings that possess people and make them go crazy and make them kill themselves, or if they have enough room to play in their mind and they're really weak and vulnerable, to kill other people.
Yeah, and that's again another thing I liked about the Gnostics, is that the idea of mind parasites, they were already talking about it 2,000 years ago, the concept of the counterfeit spirit. You find it in the Pistis Sophia, Secret Book of John, of this, how the archons install this false self within our mind that keeps us from doing good. It makes us harm ourselves. It makes us worship the wrong gods. It contains all our mistakes and sort of just, it tracks what we're doing. And yeah, it's to the Gnostics, that was the most pernicious invention of the demiurge, the ruler of this universe, the ignorant, demented ruler of this universe. And I certainly believe in it. Now I know there's like schools of thought, like David Icke or John Lamlash, or that they feed off our loosh, just our negative. But in the Gnostic text, they simply feed off of our divinity, our divine spark, because that's how they sustain the universe. Very much, you mentioned the Matrix. Instead of electricity powering the Matrix, it's our divine spark that powers the Matrix. So they'll feed off of us, but they'll keep us through any means possible, not just terror or bad decisions, but also the good stuff in life, iPhones and sex and alcohol and all that. They'll do anything to keep us trapped.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's a lot to consider, to think about being trapped in a system of control. And I know, like, for example, Robert Monroe, when he started going out of body, I don't know if he was into Gnosticism or anything like this. And I know he was previously not religious whatsoever, at least in the 50s when he started going out of body. And then, boom, he starts going out of body thousands of times. And one thing he noticed was there was a control system, and there were entities that were he called it loosh, right? That they were feeding on our entities. I mean, our energies, emotional states. That it's like gives sustenance to them. But also, as you pass into higher worlds and progress through dimensions, you'll see that there's this light source that's just like flickering, that is emanating all reality. That's how he saw it through the filter of his understanding and his experience. So I'm thinking, that's kind of like Gnosticism, right? That there's a source that's emanating all these different worlds of existence. On the lower level here, it's like, there's something feeding on us. I really just tend to think that it's like, this is the place where you come to purge your negative karma, that it's kind of basically like hell. And, the myth of Lucifer is us being in some higher spiritual form, and we got prideful, or whatever the reason is, we fell into materiality. And then through the path of Christ is the way we ascend back out of here to more heavenly realms. Right. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is hell, but hey, that's really good news, because it's the best news you'll probably really ever get, because it could be worse. Yeah,
there are lower levels of hell.
Yeah.
And that's what the Gnostics, again, they weren't just pulling stuff out of their butts. If you read Plato's Phaedo, Socrates says famously, the body is the tomb. We might be in Hades, and we don't know it. And many Gnostics or church fathers, even like Origen, said we are at the highest plane of hell, because there is suffering, there's death, there's all these, there's temporality, there is suffering, and we can't allow it. I always admire the Gnostics and the Buddhists, because they really go through the suffering part. They're not going to let it go. They're not going to say make the best of it. They're like, suffering is bad, temporality is bad. Let's go for the infinite. And in their texts, it's all their rituals. It's always, again, you go down into hell, and you can take it psychologically, right? You meet your shadow, your trauma. You got to heal that, confront your fears. And then once you overcome the archons or survive them, like Osiris, like the shaman, like Jesus, who goes down into hell for 3 days, then you go into the astral worlds, and their texts are just replete with going into these star portals. We're traveling dimensions. We're going higher and higher and avoiding the archons until, again, they reach the supreme consciousness, who they often call the alien god, but they had many names, the One. And of course, the Neoplatonists wrote about this. The Hermeticists is this astral shamanistic flight to where no man has gone beyond, the edge of reality.
Wow. Have you had any experience with this kind of stuff? Like any sort of meditative experiences or anything of that nature?
Small ones, meditation, but the big ones have been ayahuasca. That's been for me, and again, everybody's different. I don't, you do you, and your mileage may vary, but ayahuasca is what's helped me, probably because I've got so many blockages, so much trauma.
Yeah.
But ayahuasca really breaks me free, even though it is horrible, because again, same ritual, even though you have this, I do this with Santo Daime, Christian mystic from the Amazons. Its own tradition. It's the same ritual, Ryan. Oh, I'm going down into hell. I'm being torn apart. And but now I am flying across the universe like, John Lennon. And it's the most ecstatic thing in the world. But same ritual. But that's when I've had my out-of-body experiences. But it all comes with a death. Something kills me. after I've faced all my fears and trauma, then it's like, I mean, literally I've had the demons just tear me apart, and it's horrible. It's like it really happened.
Do you think that you're experiencing that because that's, or let me just say, because your whole life and your mission is so focused on these traditions that revolve around initiation and the revelation of mysteries? Because, like, for example, I've never heard of people saying every time they do ayahuasca, it's like they're being killed. They descend to hell
No,
for 3 days.
no. Sometimes, yeah, I'm talking about the most intense ones I had. Yeah,
Yeah, because
sometimes it's just a fun. Oh, I'm high.
okay, okay, I see. I thought you meant literally every time. Because
No,
I
no,
just wonder.
2 or 3 times, yeah, of the 20, 30 times I've done it. Yeah.
I wonder if that's happening to you because you are so focused on myth, ritual, traditions, you know? So it's like the spirit is presenting this to your consciousness in a digestible way, almost like putting you through a ritual initiation, but, you know, in the subtle realms, in an out of body state with ayahuasca, right? It's like a ritual from the spirit world. Um, that's just my take. Like this death and rebirth ceremony that you're having to live over and over. That's what they were doing back then.
Yeah,
That's what
it's
they were doing.
universal too.
Yeah.
Cultures see it, who have no contact with other cultures, same experiences. It truly is archetypal and universal. Shamans have been doing this for tens of thousands of years. Well, the first time that it happened to me, I had just started, I'd only been learning about the Gnostics for a few months. And I'm just, doing this music and high on ayahuasca. And it's like, oh my God, I just left my body and I am just going up into the heavens. And I had no idea about these rituals. And suddenly I see this being converge, this pure darkness, like so dark, a void. And this being said, Abraxas, I am Abraxas. And I freaked out. And I was like, oh my God, this being's going to swallow me. And interesting, Ryan, my aunt, who was, she was next door from the church, she had a broken leg. She woke up in the middle of the ritual. She was sleeping, and she like went on her wheelchair, went into the church, and my uncle, who's the patriarch, and she screamed at my uncle, "Stop, Miguel! He's too far away!" And my uncle had to come and wake me up, like shake me from my ayahuasca vision, because
Wow.
so there was something there. I mean, what alerted my aunt, next door, and what was happening? So something weird was happening.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I've had some out of body meditations, not on any substance, just purely like meditation, right? And I've seen things like I saw I saw myself as, being in this room with these like controls, and it's symbolic, right? I think a lot of this is symbolic, but it was like a hologram of reality was being expressed infinitely and fractally, and there was these enormous beings of light kind of interacting with this little control panel, and then it was like
Mm.
zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Oh, look, there's little Ryan. He's on this dimension like way down there. And it was basically like endless fractals of dimensions just constantly being created. And it was mind-blowing, and just all kinds of stuff like that, like in the out of body state, seeing fractals, seeing weird things like beings of light just
Yeah.
communicating to me. And that's not new to me. I've seen that many times with my eyes throughout my life. But yeah, I tend to think that this is a universal experience of humankind. Like the Tibetans were writing about it. Obviously, the Gnostics were writing about it. Obviously, all the mystery traditions around the world. And even in Christianity, they write about going out of body, like John of Patmos, when he's writing Revelation, that he goes out of body and he's in the realm of heaven, and he's given this vision of what is to come, right? Like this is a natural thing that is a part of our multidimensional nature, that we can directly have experience of the divine, and that our consciousness can leave the body momentarily. And as Rudolf Steiner said, perceive higher worlds, right? Through our ESP, we can perceive higher worlds. And we know that in ancient times, they would do these rituals and induce near-death states, or use certain breathing techniques, or whatever. Use chemicals like ergot root, which synthesizes LSD. We know that was in the Kykeon potion in Greece when they would do the Elysian mysteries. And we know there's some evidence of like mushrooms being used in certain cultures and things like that.
Mhm.
The acacia tree, right? That's important to the Masons, and it's supposedly buried with Hiram Abiff, and the Templars and the Masons have this idea of DMT being extracted in ancient times for rituals from the acacia
Right.
tree. So there's many ways to skin a cat, but to stop rambling for any longer on this, my point is that this is a universal thing that we've always experienced, and it's totally natural, and it's complicated. It's not just like, oh, I got to go to church on Sunday and then sit in this building for an hour and that's where I get God inside this box. Like, no, God is within you all the time, and because of this, you're powerful and you can leave your body, or you could who knows, maybe eventually we can levitate. I don't know.
I agree. Yeah. I'm following up the Elvis book with the David Bowie book. Talking about somebody who was just like Elvis, but more overtly into Gnosticism, and had extraterrestrial experience, was a natural mystic, all that. But one of the movies I compare his life to. Do you ever watch the movie called Pleasantville?
I've
It's an
never.
old film. Okay, it's a film. Toby Maguire is in it, and it's a film about this brother and sister get transported with a magical remote control to sort of a 50s TV show, and everything's black and white. The idyllic, Leave It to Beaver
Yeah.
kind of. It's called Pleasantville, and everybody's happy. The husband comes from home, the wife gives him his martini, kids have short haircuts, but this they come from this other dimension, and they start teaching everybody things like avant-garde art, or kissing people while on dates, and every time they do that, color appears in this world, and more color, and so other people start doing all these strange things again, art and sex and trying drugs, and suddenly the whole world, this black and white television show, is getting color. And of course, the powers that be feel threatened, and they try to, of course, kill those who are bringing color to Pleasantville.
Oh
And
God.
then at the end, there's this battle, and it's a great, very, very Gnostic movie if you ever check it out. But it's beautiful about how bringing color to the world, as you're talking. That's the whole idea. But something had to die, and that's the black and white 50s world.
Wow, I love that. I need to see like a master list of all your Gnostic movie recommendations.
Sure, sure.
I wrote down The Dark City, and there was another
Classic.
one
The
on your Halloween.
Matrix, obviously.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie ever.
Truman Show is another
Yep,
classic one.
love
13th
it.
Floor.
That was the one. 13th
Yeah,
floor. I wrote that down. 13th floor and The Dark City because I haven't seen those.
yeah. Ooh, and they have twists within twists within twists.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Those movies will give you a good Gnostic idea or framework, if you would, and your listeners too.
What do you think about like the whole Garden of Eden? I know we touched on this a little bit, but the idea, I guess you basically said that the serpent metaphorically is Jesus, and that would make sense, right? Like if the Gnostic view is true, and we barely scratched the surface on this, which a part of the Gnostic view includes the idea that the Old Testament God is more like Satan or an evil force that's a control figure. There is this notion that Jesus was talking about a completely different God, which I truly believe. And there's a lot of evidence for this scripturally. I think if you really use your intuitive lens, you'll see that he'll say things like, when he's talking to the Sadducees or the Pharisees, he says, your father is the father of lies, Satan. And he says things like, God is light. To worship God, we must be, God is light, God is spirit. And to worship God, we can only worship in spirit. And he just was saying these new things that didn't really jive with the Old Testament tradition, right? But
It gets better than that.
yeah.
The Gospel of John was first used by the Gnostics. That passage you just said, in the original translations, Jesus goes, "Your father is the father of the devil." In other words, He's not saying that the devil is their father, that there's a father on top. He's talking about the demiurge. So in
Right.
the original text, Jesus is talking about, you know, the father, the demiurge. So
So that would very much make sense, though, if we have it wrong and we have it backwards for the last 2,000 years. And instead of Adam and Eve expected to be good little slaves and not question and not seek knowledge, but they're just expected to sit there like prisoners and not express any free will or curiosity, it would make sense that in truth, the serpent probably was the good guy.
he was an awakener, and serpents are symbols of wisdom. And that's probably what the original story was. Because, as most know, the Adam and Eve is probably based on the Anunnaki story, where Enki creates the first humans. And in the original story, actually, Eve was superior to Adam, and the Gnostics, they kept that. Eve is actually the awakened Sophia who's trying to help Adam. It's not, the whole rib thing and all that. She is Sophia that's also smuggled into the Garden of Eden to help Adam, and the story then goes. And remember, you have the story of what Yahweh defeating Leviathan and Behemoth. So again, you have this story about this serpent that's defeated by the solar male left-wing powers. But yeah, the Garden of Eden, according to the Gnostics, was not a good place. It's an illusion, a prison, and Adam and Eve were really the heroes along with the serpent.
Yeah, I think that does make sense to me. And then there was something else. I got distracted by the solar thing. Something that a very good friend of mine in the Templar tradition told me was that anytime that you see like a solar symbol in the ancient past in regards to a mythological or religious tradition, in modern times people would think, oh, they worshipped the sun. No, they didn't. But it was rather a symbol that they believed in the esoteric view of God. And that the true sun is God, but this can only be experienced not in the physical dimension, but when you cross the void, either through death or going out of body or whatever it is that you do to leave the body. That the true light of God, and it's a white light, it exists in another world, right? And that's the sun. That it's not this physical orb in the sky that people were worshiping, but that is just even a symbolic expression of the higher emanation, which, as we know, is not material. This dense physical world is a lower world, and the higher we go, the physical fades away, and it's more spirit, it's more mental, psychic, whatever. So I find that very interesting. But
Yeah, I think it's a good one. When the Police thing had that old song, "There Must Be an Invisible Sun," they were probably right.
yeah, definitely. Like they have this notion of the star Sirius being a secret sun. That's a Mason thing. I think that song by Soundgarden, what, Black Hole Sun. So
Good one.
and that people speculate that as being a negative thing. I don't know enough about it to have an opinion either way, but it's just
I
I like.
also remember most stars in the universe are binary stars. In other words, there's always two suns. And some have said, well, we might have a second sun, but we can't see it, or it's been hidden from us. And that's part of why we're so imbalanced, because we don't know, that there are two suns, and we need those twin spirits, if you would. So
Yeah. Wow. Well, I have really enjoyed this. I think that I could sit here and just pull, this thread for hours and hours and hours, and I definitely get the sense that we need to do this again.
for sure.
So thank you very much for coming on the show and, giving me some of your time. That's very special to me. Please remind the viewers one more time where they can find your show.
Yeah, no, it's been a blast. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to do that because the real king of this universe is speaking. But yeah, once again, go to either thegodabovegod.com or see my name, just put my name together in all small letters, miguelconner.com, and you'll get to where you need to go. My books, blogs, social media, podcasts, it's all there. Either one you go. Either road you take.
I hope you guys at home have enjoyed hearing more about Gnosticism. Please be sure to check out his show Aeon Byte if you are interested in Gnosticism. He literally, his entire program, I'm not talking an episode or two like your boy with Bledsoe Said So does. I'm talking the entire program catalog is dedicated to Gnosticism, and it is very deep. And it is a really good show. So you guys show him some love. Thank you again, Miguel. And I'm just going to close out the way that we always do, which is saying, bye, guys. And you can join with me, or you can just sit there looking cool like the king. And, either way, thanks again, man.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.